My name is Sherry Conrad with RMTC-DHH. I'm going to be monitoring the room for Scott today. Welcome to this one-hour webinar entitled Educational Interpreters in the Classroom Setting. I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Scott Walsh from RMTC-DHH, who's going to be presenting for us today. Educational interpreters play such a critical role in our students' success in the academic environment. Scott brings not only an extensive background of experience in effectively utilizing and ingraining interpreters into the classroom setting, but he also brings unique perspectives on how students have overcome academic and language barriers through the use of educational interpreters. After the presentation is complete, we will take a few questions. You should know a little bit about the Zoom environment before we begin. Today's webinar is being closed captioned. To see the closed captions, click the Captions button in the Zoom menu and the captions will appear along the bottom of your screen. Thank you so much to Ann Armstrong from Alternative Communication Services for providing captions today. We want to make sure everyone can contribute to the conversation. Even though your mic is muted, we want to hear your questions, comments, and thoughts, and we want you to interact with others in the room. If you don't see the chat panel, click the chat panel button in the Zoom menu and you can select specific attendees to chat with during the webinar. Above the field where you enter text, you will see a blue drop-down menu. You should be able to select everyone if you want to communicate with everyone. I will be monitoring the chat and dropping some links throughout the webinar for Scott. We mentioned it in our email notifications, but this webinar is being recorded and it will be archived on the RMTC-DHH TA Live webpage. As a reminder, we do request that you take a post survey for TA Live at the end of the session. We thank you in advance to contributing to our continued self-assessment of our work. With all that business done, I'd like to welcome Scott Walsh. Thanks for being here today, Scott. I'll turn the session over to you.
Thank you for having me. Hey guys, welcome to Educational Interpreters in the Classroom Setting, a guide for interpreters, teachers, and staff. I'm Scott Walsh, a Deaf Education and Training Specialist with the Resource Materials and Technology Center for the Deaf and Hard of Hearing. RMTC-DHH is a discretionary project funded by the Florida Department of Education. It offers professional development, on-site observation, consultation, training, and technical assistance, as well as offers a free loan library. RMTC also provides language evaluations and assessments, information and referrals, and tons of resources. All services and materials available from RMTC are provided at no charge. This is the amazing group of people that make up RMTC-DHH. During this presentation, we'll be covering a variety of topics, including the roles and responsibilities of classroom teachers, teachers of the deaf and educational interpreters who are members of the IEP team, documentation specific to the development of the student's IEP, and resources for information and training, and the role as an educational interpreter as part of the IEP team. RMTC has developed a LiveBinder of materials related to disciplines of educational interpreting. You can also access this collection of resources at any time by visiting the web address on the screen. Our first topic that we're going to cover today is going to be on the deaf lens. As we strive to elevate both our students' academic success as well as our instructional delivery, we must first recognize the world in which our students live. By doing this, we are able to target their unique needs based on their experience, but even more on their perspective. We work with a very unique and dynamic population of students. We also work with a population of students that, by many, are not understood. Hearing loss in general can be perceived as very personalized and unique to the individual. Because of this, it is difficult to target consistent areas of impact across multiple settings and multiple students with hearing loss. As we elevate areas that impact access for each student, it is imperative to look at the student as an individual and to be able to see the environment through his or her perspective. Likewise, it is also important to note that each individual environment, from the classroom setup, the instructor, the student, and the delivery of information, impacts our students in different ways. My challenge for you today, as we discuss accessibility, is to pick one student that you serve and evaluate each of the environments that they experience from the very beginning of their day until they are dropped off on the bus in the afternoon. For this slide, I'm going to speak very personally. As we've already talked about, it is difficult to give a blanket statement of areas that impact accessibility for students that are deaf or hard of hearing, given that each hearing loss is unique to the individual. I'd like to share areas that have impacted my accessibility over the years in the educational environment, as well as areas that continue to impact my accessibility as an adult. In first grade, I was diagnosed with a bilateral mild hearing loss of 25 decibels. At that time, my ability to access my environment through sound with the support of hearing aids was almost comparable to my peers. Accommodations such as preferential seating and having the teacher face the class when giving instruction was all that I really needed to be able to access my environment. By middle school, my hearing loss had decreased to 45 decibel loss. With a change of environments, a change of instructors, and a change in my ability to access sound, my accommodations had to change as well. At that time, auditory processing, lip reading, and the need for self-advocacy played a huge role in my ability to access my environment. With my hearing loss continuing to decrease, my dependency on proximity to speaker, relationship with people in my environment, and the need for restatements and clarification became priority. As an adult, I now have a profound sensorineural bilateral hearing loss. My loss extends to 95 decibels in 2,000 to 5,000 hertz range. Accessibility at this level looks drastically different than where it began in first grade with a 25 decibel loss. My primary mode of communication is still spoken English. However, in my home environment, my family and I are transitioning to a mixture of spoken English and American Sign Language. In my work environment, my team utilizes both spoken English and ASL to promote accessibility, which enables me to access language in any setting that we are in. My biggest accommodation I still rely on is proximity to speaker, or when signing, visual access to the speaker, and relationships with my audience. As we work with our students, we have to evaluate the student as a whole and as an individual, and be able to see the world through their perspective. We have to be able to predict what their potential hurdles are without them having the language or the advocacy skills to express those hurdles themselves. One of the most common barriers that we initially have to overcome as educators is language. Many of our students arrive at school with either limited to or no language at all, or with a significant gap in their language compared to their hearing peers. There is no discrimination of language deprivation among students with a hearing loss that utilize spoken English or students with a hearing loss that utilize ASL as their primary mode of communication. While there are many intricate components of language that impact language acquisition, there are two overlying components that are most prevalent for our students to be able to communicate: expressive and receptive language. This barrier in itself can manifest a multitude of different outcomes, ranging from but not limited to undesired behaviors used to communicate with others, a lack of attention, hyperactivity, a lack of engagement, frustration, and a significant impact on the ability to consistently progress academically. Other common barriers that are seen in the educational environment is a limited visual or auditory access. Even with the assistance of hearing aids, cochlear implants, BAHAs, and arm hat equipment, students still heavily rely on the ability to utilize visual cues and auditory cues to maintain engagement in their educational environment. Heavily linked to language acquisition is prior knowledge. Many of our students experience the world in a very different way and different perspective than we do. Going back to each student is unique. Likewise, each student's experience is also unique. Many of our students are involved or engaged in similar activities or experiences as their hearing peers. However, there's a lack of incidental learning, which is directly impacted by not having access to language in those environments. This impact This impacts prior knowledge and the student's ability to scaffold new knowledge based on pre-existing knowledge. I wanted to share an example with you today. I had a student come to me one day, so excited to tell me what he did over the weekend. He described this big, wonderful trip that his family took to a place that he didn't know the name of and did activities that he didn't have the language to communicate his experience. It went something kind of similar to this. Mr. Walsh, my family and I took a trip this weekend. We got in the car and we drove and drove and drove and drove down the road for a long time. We went into the gate, we walked and walked and walked and walked. 4 hours later, we had lunch. I had a hot dog and red stuff. I rode a green bike. I rode a green ride. You know, green seat, up, down. I had so much fun. Mom and Dad bought me pink fluffy thing on stick. It was delicious. Dad got mad. We went home. This moment was really eye-opening to me. I realized that my students had an amazing day over the weekend and had absolutely no language to express what he had experienced. I spent the next 30 minutes pulling information from him, trying to identify where he and his family had gone that weekend. My goal was to attach meaning and language to his experience so that he could clearly communicate his experience with others and eventually build upon those experiences. As we navigated through his trip, I found out that he had gone to Universal Studios with his family to ride his favorite ride, the Hulk. They ate at one of their family's favorite restaurants, and he had a hot dog with the red stuff being ketchup and French fries. His mom and dad bought him cotton candy, that pink fluffy thing on a stick, that he wound up sharing with his sister. Later on that day, his dad twisted his ankle, and due to this, he and his family had to go back home. The lesson I took away from this experience was never to assume that experience alone is equitable access. But my student had an amazing opportunity to participate in what many other students in Florida also get to experience. A lack of language prevented him from being able to build a foundation of knowledge that he could later reference back to and build upon. The next area that we're going to discuss is classroom teacher expectations and student responsibilities. Before we talk about the responsibilities of educational interpreters, let's look at some of the other roles that will be impacted by the utilization of an interpreter. This includes the teacher for students who are deaf or hard of hearing and classroom teacher. A student's IEP team consists of the following members. These members must be aware of or be able to address the unique needs of the students who are deaf and hard of hearing for the purpose of ensuring access to instruction is adequate and equitable. Each member must be able to see the student through the deaf and hard of hearing lens. For the purpose of this training, we will focus on the roles of the teacher of the students who are deaf and hard of hearing, also known as the TOD, the classroom teacher, regular or special education teacher, and the educational interpreter, and of course the student. These professionals look first at the individual student, and then, through specially designed instruction, they teach students the underlying skills that they need to learn the general curriculum. The teacher of the deaf is able to identify which skill in the academic hierarchy the student has not yet acquired due to their language delay or lack of access, and then address these skills during the IEP process. These skills are taught through instruction of the Expanded Skills Standard. Expanded Skills Standards address topics specific to the need of the students who are deaf and hard of hearing, and are taught in addition to the skills taught as part of the general curriculum available at any public school. These standards include topics to ensure students who are deaf and hard of hearing have knowledge and skills related to having a hearing loss, and include the following: knowledge of hearing loss, language and accommodations, personal and interpersonal skills, self-determination, self-advocacy, transition, deaf culture and heritage. TODs are the experts on a campus or in a district who can teach the student who is deaf and hard of hearing everything that they need to know about their hearing loss, its impact on their communication with others, and how to maintain the hearing assistive technology, self-advocacy skills, appropriate boundaries when working with their interpreters, and about their IEP and accommodations. The teacher of the deaf may also be the professional who consults with the general education teacher to understand the roles of the educational interpreter and how to effectively work together. Depending on the district, this may also be a program specialist. They could also be the person who provides consultation to all of the staff at the school related to the specific nature and need of the student who is deaf or hard of hearing. Some specific examples of how a TOD could work in a student's classroom. They could help the teacher understand why and how the student passes around mic is critical for having access to what is happening in the classroom and being sure that this is listed on the IEP as a necessary classroom accommodation. When an FM is broken, not charged, or left at home, additional accommodations are necessary to provide access. The TOD outlines additional accommodation that can be used during this time. He or she may be responsible for training the rest of the team, the teacher, and the interpreter about what to do in this case. An example is a student may not be able to hear on the computer without an FM connection. So an added accommodation could be for the interpreter to listen to the computer output and voice it or interpret it for the students that they have access. An alternative activity may need to be assigned on those days. This is also the case when a TOD can help the student to understand how hearing loss and hearing assistive technology are necessary and how to advocate in order for necessary accommodations to be accessible, resulting in the students avoiding becoming frustrated. Often when a DHH student begins a new school year, they are introduced to a new classroom environment and new instructional staff. It is not uncommon for general education teachers to have little or no experience working with students who are deaf or hard of hearing. As teachers of the deaf and educational interpreters, it is important to teach the perspective and cultural norms when interacting with students who are deaf or hard of hearing. A student cannot watch an interpreter and take notes at the same time, so a copy of the notes is necessary for them to have access. Teachers should avoid the use of vague terms like this or that. We must make sure that students follow the behavioral intervention plan as it relates to consequences, rewards, and expectations. Pacer spacers for presentations are an excellent tool for teachers to use during a lesson. A pacer spacer is a little square in the corner of each slide that provides a visual indication, red, yellow, and green, of a predetermined amount of time for students to view a slide prior to the presentation being delivered or taught the content. This ensures that the students are able to access the visual content on a slide before receiving auditory or visual input from the teacher or interpreter. Other expectations that support accessibility in the classroom environment are speaking directly to the student as opposed to attending to the interpreter, avoiding terms like tell him or tell her, wear amplification components as necessary, support a classroom of inclusion and awareness for all students with disabilities, have open conversations about classroom routines, rules, and expectations. Asking an interpreter to not sign something can be very rude and is a practice that should not be allowed in a classroom. If the teacher or adult wants to say something privately, they should excuse themselves to have the conversation, similar to the manner in which they would do for a student who can hear. Regarding conversations about classroom routines, rules, and expectations, it is important for the teacher and the interpreter to come to an understanding about routines and expectations before situations arrive in the classroom. Wendy Moravsky, in her book Collaborative Teaching in Elementary Schools, recommends having a pre-conference with a co-teacher to establish routines and responsibilities between the two parties. The same can be said of the relationship between educational interpreters and a classroom teacher. Conversation about expectations and guidelines is best before the problems arrive. Just as we have responsibility to advocate for our students have responsibility as well. These examples are often above and beyond what other students experience in their educational environment, and therefore tend to not be learned through incidental learning. Each of these skills needs to be explicitly taught and modeled to the students in order for them to become proficient in their ability to effectively navigate their educational environment with success. In this next session, section, we will be exploring the roles and duties of educational interpreters. So let's start with the basics. What is the role of the educational interpreter? An educational interpreter must effectively communicate classroom information between the teacher, the deaf student, and other hearing students according to the language level of the student and the goals of the individualized education plan. Interpreting in general is more than just knowing how to sign competently. Interpreters must process language quickly and accurately, and they must think about spoken English and sign language simultaneously. Educational interpreting is also about being able to support the educational goals and outcomes as defined by the student's individualized education plan. There are many aspects to the educational interpreter's job that require more than just simply conveying the words and the grammar the teacher says or uses to communicate with the student. This quote cannot be more real for our students who are deaf and hard of hearing. Language is so much more than what we just say. Language is facial expressions, language is body movement, and language is interactions between others. The role of the educational interpreter is not to only focus on what's being verbally shared, but is also on what's being shared non-verbally between the interactions of teachers and students. Equitable access is the key, but what does equitable mean? Equitable means a child who relies on an interpreter has access to everything that a child who is hearing has access to. What does that mean for us? If we do not provide equitable access to the student's educational environment, we have infringed upon their rights to a free and appropriate public education in their least restrictive environment in accordance with IDEA. Equitable access is not easy to achieve. According to Schick and Williams, the statistics on the slide represent the level of students' comprehension when an interpreter performs at varied levels according to the Educational Interpreter Performance Assessment. The big takeaway from this is that even at the highest level of performance on the EIPA, students are still likely missing as much as 10% of the content. I'm going to give you just a second to look at the slide before we move on. In these next two slides, we are going to cover responsibilities and duties of educational interpreters. It is important to remember that each interpreter plays a critical role in our students' access to the educational environment. It is not what a person says, but how they say it. An interpreter's responsibility is to render a message faithfully while ensuring the interpreter is capturing the intent and spirit of what is being said. Another role of an interpreter is to prepare for upcoming lessons to proactively address any new signs or concepts they may need to review prior to the lesson. During the delivery of the lesson, the educational interpreter should strategically position themselves in a manner that allows visual access to both the speaker and the interpreter from the perspective of the student who is deaf or hard of hearing. Side note to remember is that interpreters cannot teach new information and should not be expected to do so. Providing support, tutoring, and remediation under the direction of the teacher would be the expectation. In the role of an educational interpreter, it is important to synchronize to the pace of the speaker, affording the student the opportunity to engage in class discussion and have the ability to answer questions without the concern of lag time. It is important to note this point that students may need time to process language. By keeping pace with the instructor, it will allow for students to process information during natural pauses that are pre-established in the instructional delivery of new content. Professional development and adhering to the district's code of professional conduct ensures that we are presenting the most proficient levels of providing the most proficient levels of interpreting services we can, while also continuing to develop ourselves as professionals. In the field of education, our expectation is to develop lifelong learners. As educators and interpreters, we too are held to a high standard of being lifelong learners. Continuing to improve our practices achieves two things. The first is that we're elevating ourselves as professionals while also delivering a standard of excellency in our interpreting services to our students. And then the second is that we're modeling to our students the importance of continuous education, what it means to be a lifelong learner. The inverted pyramid of responsibility shows how the responsibility of the interpreter is heavier when a child is in elementary school and decreases as a student gets older. Conversely, the student's responsibility is less in elementary and increases with age. An elementary student may need more reminders to look at the interpreter, may need more tutoring, and may need more frequent comprehension checks from the interpreter, whereas a high school student should know how to use the interpreter and how to advocate if they do not understand. These skills are developed through experience, modeling, and direct instruction on how to effectively utilize an interpreter to facilitate communication. Our next topic of discussion that we'll be covering will be on the Individuals with Disability Education Act, also known as IDEA, and Florida Department of Education, FLDOE, Interpreter Services. Written in 2012, the FLDOE's Technical Assistant Paper addresses and provides guidance on interpreting services for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. Honestly, not a lot has changed since this last revision. It is important to note that this technical assistant paper, there is not an outline of specific duties, but rather general guidelines and information on interpreting services. RMTC-DHH has created a list of links that have been updated, which were associated with the FLDOE's technical assistance paper. Sherry will share this link in the chat box for anyone who is interested in exploring the technical assistance paper and links further. Due to time constraints, we are unable to go into depth with the whole tab. We will, however, discuss some honorable mentions from the tab that are important for both interpreters and teachers. Take a minute and go ahead and read the slide if you can. Secondary tasks that may be assigned to interpreters may include tutoring a student who is deaf or hard of hearing after the materials has been taught under the direction of the classroom teacher, collaborating with educational personnel and other duties that may be assigned as a result of the interpreter and under the result of the interpreter's knowledge and expertise in sign language and deafness. It is important to note that all secondary roles are subordinate to the primary role of interpreting. Additionally, as members of the educational team, interpreters must adhere to federal and state laws, state Board of Education rules, and district or school rules and policies. So what are ways interpreters can gather information about upcoming lessons? Well, interpreters can attend regular scheduled grade level planning meetings, meet with teachers monthly to discuss scope and sequence, request teacher editions of books to follow scope and sequence, subscribe to teacher newsletters and email or social media blasts, and pull lesson plans from the school-based network. As a critical member to the multidisciplinary team, it is imperative that the educational interpreter adheres to and follows the student's individualized education plan. Each section of the IEP is dependent upon one critical piece for our students who are deaf and hard of hearing: access. The interpreter services is a role that breaks down barriers for students to be able to access their environment. Due to their significant role that they play in our student success, it is imperative that they are well versed in the unique needs and individualized goals that their students have. Extending on section D4 of the technical assistance paper pertaining to educational interpreters. If the student or parents need an interpreter at an IEP meeting, a different person should provide the interpretation so that the related service providers can fully participate in the meeting. This enables stakeholders that work daily with the student and demonstrate extensive knowledge of the unique needs that the student has to be present and serve as a contributing member of the multidisciplinary team. Our interpreters' perspectives and insights may be one of the most extensive at the table, as they are the ones that experience the entirety of the student's day and are able to advocate for the student based on their unique needs he or she may have in each of the academic environments. Our last point of discussion, we will cover the IEP and communication plan. The Individual Education Plan, IEP, serves as a document that guides the team to ensure that all areas of the student's needs are being addressed throughout the educational environment. Over these next several slides, we are going to explore the different sections of the IEP and how they impact the role of the educational interpreter. In the IEP, the team should be justifying why the student needs an interpreter. The PARC is a great example of one tool that we could use to evaluate a student's readiness to use an educational interpreter. Other sections of the tool are used to determine if they are ready for general education placement, ready for captioning or transcribing services, and other parts of the instructional communication access. The need and justification for the interpreter can be embedded in just about every section of the IEP. Present levels. In that section, does the student watch the interpreter? Does the student know what to do in an emergency if the interpreter is not there? In the annual goal section, the team may want to draft an annual goal for teaching the students how to effectively utilize an interpreter in a classroom. Specially designed instruction. In that section, the student will need to be taught how to request, attend to, and evaluate if the interpreter was effective for their access. This can be done by the teacher of the deaf. Related services. Interpreters are listed on the IEP as a related service. A related service is a support that a student needs to be able to access their specially designed instruction. And in the accommodation section, interpreters can provide accommodations the students need both in the classroom or on assessments proctored by a test proctor. The communication plan is a key component of the IEP. It serves as a document that governs and protects the delivery of instruction in the student's primary mode of communication, also known as their L1 or first language. This plan is critical for interpreters to access as it indicates both the student's preferred method of receptive and expressive language, as well as their communication level. The Educational Interpreter Project has developed a webpage specifically designed to address the interpreter's participation in the completion of the communication plan. In addition, RMTC-DHH and EIP collaboratively developed the interpreter input form for the Florida's communication plan for students who are deaf and hard of hearing. It is directly aligned to the sections of the communication plan. And guys, I can't thank you enough for having the privilege to present with you guys today. If you have any questions, or if I can support in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out to me at any point. My email address is on the slide, and I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here with you.
Sorry guys, I had several windows open as I was furiously linking things in the chat box and making sure that we have, you know, access to everyone. And I just wanted to point out that RMTC's monthly webinar, TA Live, is a free resource for learning about hot topics in the education of students who are deaf and hard of hearing. Upcoming topics of particular interest to interpreters include keeping your hat on, hearing assistive technology, where we'll welcome professionals from the Debbie School from Miami. If you can't join us, no problem. You guys know that all webinars are recorded with captions for asynchronous viewing, and that even comes with a handy dandy certificate of participation. So make sure that you guys check that out. Next slide, please, Mr. Walsh. We definitely want to thank you for being here today. On the screen now, you will see the educational and interpreters in the classroom setting, a guide for educational interpreters, teachers, students, and staff. Evaluation slide. Please either put that evaluation link into your favorite web browser or scan the QR code and make sure that you complete that evaluation. Scott, we do have a question from the DHH Sweetwater team. Can notes for interpreters be added as an accommodation onto the IEP? Scott, you are muted. There you go.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Gotcha.
Sherry, I'm gonna lean on you a little bit on this one. So when I was looking at, or just wanted to clarify that question, is that teacher notes for the interpreters? So the teachers can reference that before the class or to utilize after the class setting?
I'm waiting to see teacher notes given to the interpreters.
Teacher notes given to the interpreters.
Prior to the lesson.
Prior to the lesson. While it's not directly there for the student, it is a collaboration piece that should be considered and worked on as a team to support that student. I feel that that piece may not be in the IEP, but it needs to be a critical part of communication plan and being able to support that student as a wraparound piece of just both the interpreter, the teacher for the deaf, and the classroom teacher to all be on the same page and working together cohesively. Sherry, can you contribute to that a little bit?
Well, I was going to say it might be possible to include that under supports for school staff. There's a section for that on the IEP where you could outline the need for interpreters to have preparatory material. The other option would be you could actually possibly write it as a supplementary aid or service that notes are provided so that the student can receive meaningful educational benefit from the interpreter being well prepared for their assignment. So I think that you probably could, if you have a situation where that is critical to the student having equitable access to language, I think that it could be covered either under that supports for school staff or as a supplementary aid or service. So that was a great question, Sweetwater. They also added in the chat box, maybe that could even be added as part of the meeting notes. Absolutely.
That's a great idea.
Great call. We have another question from Catherine Montesino. Is the educational interpreter responsible for a young child's hearing aid maintenance, such as keeping them clean? Also, is the educational interpreter accountable for lost or damaged hearing aids for a young DHH child?
Both good questions. I'm going to answer the first one before we move on to the second. When you look at a young child that's trying to navigate and learn about hearing aid equipment, obviously it's going to be it needs to be taught and modeled for them daily. And again, going back to the team that surrounds that student, it's going to be the teacher, it's going to be the interpreter, it's going to be the teacher of the deaf, it's going to be anybody that's there that has knowledge on that to work with that student. That sole responsibility should not fall just on one person. It should be a collective unit or collective group of people supporting. And eventually, as we showed you with the pyramids, that role eventually transitions back to the student being able to take on those additional responsibilities of knowing how to clean the equipment, knowing how to change batteries, knowing how to maintain and keep it, keep up with it. But initially they're going to need that modeling, and an interpreter is a great opportunity to be a model for that, as well as the other members of that team. What was the second part of that question, Sherry?
Is the educational interpreter accountable for lost or damaged hearing aids, specifically for a young student who's DHH?
No, ma'am. It is a group piece that it's. Oh, jump in here, Sherry. Help me with this one a little bit. I said no because I'm thinking like
that's fine.
Responsibility falling on that interpreter. But
I agree with you, Scott. I don't believe that the educational interpreter specifically would be responsible. Here's the thing about hearing aids and things like that. That's really going to depend on their district's protocol, who's responsible for what, who's, responsible for the continuous monitoring. Sometimes it is the interpreter who's doing that daily hearing aid check that's required by the matrix in order to be able to rate that child higher on the matrix of services, because it does have to be checked by an adult. And I would even go further and say, that daily check really is the district's a surety that the technology is working so that the student has the auditory access that they need. Now, if a student is wearing hearing aids and the IEP team determines that that child requires that amplification or that technology in order to access instruction, then it's the district's responsibility to make sure that they're providing access for that child. So if the hearing aids were to if the school amplification were to get lost, then it would fall back on the district to make sure that they have a replacement plan or a workaround or something. So but to say that it's, Mako Conrad as the responsible party for holding on to the hearing aids, I don't think that would be anything that IDEA or state statute would say. That really is going to be, district protocol. But these are great questions.
They are really great questions.
I know you guys have more questions out there. I can feel them. Oh, I see another one. Okay, please, what role does the educational interpreter have with communicating the student's needs to the parents?
Oh, good questions.
They are.
So from my personal experience and my background, I've always wanted that connection directly to the teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing. And it shouldn't fall onto the educational interpreter solely to have that communication or be that direct line of communication with that parent. And it also goes back to what Sherry was just talking about, falling on district and district protocol and decisions of what that looks like. From my experience, I have come together with my interpreter to have conversations with parents on what's happened in the class that day and how progress has been made because they were there. But I was always right there with them at the end of it, though. It doesn't fall directly on the responsibility does not fall solely or directly onto the interpreter. And that's definitely a district by district decision piece.
I completely agree with your response. That's a really great response. And those are good questions. All right, you guys, you have about another minute or so while I sit here and talk about the fact that y'all need to all be filling out your evaluation, which is in the chat box. So please make sure that you finish that evaluation. And if we have no more questions, I will go ahead and begin. I will begin the end, Mr. Walsh.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you guys for all being here, but thank you, Scott, for presenting today. That really was some good information. We'd also like to take this time to thank our CART provider, Ann Armstrong from Alternative Communication Services, for providing the captions today. Oh, wait, so sorry. Yes, we're thankful to Ann, but we have one more question. Catherine Montesino asks, who holds the educational interpreter accountable for continuing education?
Again, I'm going to fall back on experience that I've had. As a DHH unit, we've come together and decided what those pieces look like in regards to continuing education and promoting promoting that knowledge and that ability to be lifelong learners, like we talked about. And it was a group decision that was there, but it was led by our specialists and by our department head. But I think, again, going back to district by district, I know when you look out into these rural areas, there's not a DHH unit. Sometimes there's a DHH teacher, and that's it. One teacher for a county or two teachers for a county. So there's not this big pot, and that looks very different than when you go down to a much larger district and you have an entire team of DHH people, and that's overseen by a department head. So again, it goes back to that school and that district perspective on how they're operating that unit.
Also added in the chat box, Kara says the Educational Interpreter Project can help provide resources to continue an interpreter's learning. I think that's a great point also, that the EIP really is a phenomenal resource. And I don't know if the participants here realize that not every state has the discretionary projects that Florida has. So not every state has an educational interpreter project, or even an RMTC for that matter. So we really are blessed to have those projects in our states so that people can get that continued learning and that professional growth. So Kara also writes that RMTC also has some videos that educational interpreters can check out for continued learning. And districts can even request the Educational Interpreter Project to bring a training into their district for the interpreters. And that can be anything that, that could be collaborated with Jennifer Francisco, who is the project director for the Educational Interpreter Project. So that's a great point to make too. Thank you, Kara. Any other questions? We do have some time, so if anyone has some questions, we're more than happy to answer them. Okay. So we really would like to thank you, Scott, and we want to thank Anne from Alternative Communication Services for providing captions for us today. And finally, thank you all so much for allowing us to be a part of your day. The recording is going to be posted on the RMTC-DHH website, but you know, we love hearing from you guys, and we're happy to help in any way that we can. You can connect with us through social media like Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. You can also sign up for our newsletter. We would love your comments on social media about what you learned, but make sure you use the hashtag RMTC-DHH and hashtag FLDEAFED, Florida Deaf Ed. As many of you know, we are a Florida Department of Education Bureau of Exceptional Education and Student Services discretionary project, and all of the services we provide are provided at no cost to the participants. To continue our work, we must collect survey data to justify why our services are needed. If each of you could please complete this survey right now, we would greatly appreciate it. If you had a colleague who missed this broadcast or you'd like to rewatch it later, head on over to our website, rmtc-dhh.org/TA-live. Thank you again from all of the staff from RMTC. Candace did just add one more comment. She said that you can email Kathy Hunsinger to get on the EIP email list to get information about upcoming workshops and more. And that email address is in the chat box. It's khuntZin@pasco.k12.fl.us. Again, thank you all for being here today. Fill out those surveys. Thank you to Scott, and thank you to Ann and all of the RMTC staff working in the background. We wish you all a wonderful day. I'm going to end the broadcast now.